Welcome to the second episode of Losing Our Marbles for season 1 of whatever this is going to be. Thank y'all for joining in. Hope you enjoyed the first episode. It seems to have gone well enough that we can do a second episode. And for our second episode, we have a second guest. Surprisingly, someone else actually wanted to subject themselves to this. It's amazing. So without further ado, I present GoTeach.
Hi.
It's GoTeach, everyone.
Oh, hi.
Yay. Thank you for coming in and thank you for doing the show.
You're welcome.
So, here we are in our little chat, having some fun. I'm going to start things off.
Okay.
With a very good question. How's Texas doing?
How's
I keep hearing these things about Texas.
Hot. It's hot.
It seems like some things are going on in Texas. Wanted to hear from direct from the source.
I mean, it's hot pretty much every day. I'm in the Houston area, so it's a little bit warmer than some of the other parts of the state. Don't know about all of Texas. I know Mackenzie was saying the other night that he's had a lot of hailstorms lately. That's not my area. We're more subject to the hurricane bits.
Yep.
Which we haven't had yet. So it's just really hot.
All right. Well, that's surviving nonetheless. That's more than people can ask for these days, I must say.
Right. Says it feels like 97 outside and it's not even noon. So that's, Sounds
like Texas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like Texas.
And we both are sporting our drinks of choice today, so that's always good. Glad to see us.
I got my coffee and my water. So
yes, I have coffee and tea right now with myself. Cold tea and hot coffee. Heaven forbid we go the other way. Well, I know some things about you, and you know some things about me. But some of the people watching may not know that there's a bit of a rapport that has suspended itself through the time. Oh my goodness, I just tacked your face to watch the arm motions there. But we've got a good back and forth history. I think we're both fairly scientifically minded.
Yes, very much.
Very much slaves to accuracy. And I just want to give us a preamble, a disclaimer, if you will, for this stream. There may come a point where it seems like she and I get into a petty argument back and forth of nitpicking one another into oblivion. And I want to show you, that's called human connection. Okay, that's how two human beings actually relate to one another. When they are both so passionate and decisive about what they understand to be true in the world, and the two aren't meshing. It's a very important thing to make it mesh, and it's a messy process, but it's not an ugly process. It's not a vitriolic process. It's just a process. So
sort of a scientific process.
It's a scientific process. Some kittens will have to die if we're going to figure this out, okay? We have to shampoo the rats before we shampoo the human beings. How do we know if all the hair is going to fall out? We have to test. It's going to happen, okay? So just understand that going ahead. All right, preamble and disclaimer aside, I have a question, scientifically speaking, since we're already going in that direction.
Okay.
Dramatic sip of coffee. I have often been fascinated by the future of biochemistry. And while your particular field, for those of you who don't know, is not so much in the biosphere of chemistry, more in the textile sphere of industry, I'm curious as to think what you think the future of chemistry is as far as applied to the modern world.
Ooh. So chemistry is in everything we really do. For a couple years, I worked at a company that developed touchscreens, and there was a lot of chemistry involved with that. There's a lot of chemistry involved in pretty much everything. The company I worked for also did stuff with coatings for phones. So the stuff on your phone to make sure that when you drop it, it doesn't make your phone crack. Pretty much any product that you make has some layer of chemistry in it. Someone went through a scientific process to develop that material and make sure that it was fitting what the criteria that they set out for that product. So it's everywhere. It's going to continue to be extremely relevant forever, pretty much, until we are non-corporeal beings in a non-corporeal world.
And even then, you're still going to have
Even
to use
then.
chemistry to run the servers, right? Even if they're at a quantum level, there's still going to be some
Right.
chemistry going on in there.
Right, yeah. So it's everywhere. It's going to be relevant for a really long time. Not sure if you're talking just in the future in general, or are you talking about like with human evolution and stuff like that?
It could go in both ways. So there's a lot of applications, as you just said, with chemistry,
Right.
and
So, yeah.
you can go into the chemistry of medicine. You could go into the chemistry of just basic human
Yes.
genomes, or you can even
Yes.
just go into the chemistry of human life. Even like something I'm particularly interested in is stuff like living materials. So you
Yes.
could make a concrete bridge that'll break apart after 1,000 years, or you
Right.
could make a living concrete bridge that photosynthesizes sunlight to maintain
Ooh.
energy and can repair its own cracks.
Right. And I mean, we're still making massive strides in biochemistry today. I think in the last 5 years, they've come up with 3D printed organs. I'm not sure
Yep.
how well they work, but that was in
They're
the
getting
news
there.
a while
They're
ago.
getting
Yeah,
there.
they're getting there. And where there's a will, there's a way. And humans are really good at imagining new things and trying to make them work. So I think that the sky's the limit on biochemistry in the future, like science in general. A lot of stuff that we have today was thought up 100 plus years ago, and it just took time to catch up to those ideas in our scientific understanding. So I don't know that you could really guess what's going to come.
Well, at least at the very near future, I think one thing that's going to be heavily debated pretty soon will be grown meat, which I'm on
Yes.
board. The less living things we have to kill, I'm all for it. And the first batch of rigorously tested and governmentally approved grown meat, I'm eating it. I will pay triple if need be to fund that operation, because I think that's a great direction to go.
Well, and that also then raises the question about like vegetarians and vegans who, choose their diet based off of some preferences might deal with taste, but a lot of it has to do with the concern for the animals and the animal life forms that they are consuming or, you know, getting nutrients from in some cases, if you're talking like vegans versus vegetarians. So that is an interesting concept because you already have things like soy that are being used to substitute what we would traditionally eat for protein. So then it comes in as, is this meat or is this just a protein substitute that's man-made? So that'd be interesting to
Right.
see.
And even, extending the morality further, as I like to do, if you're against killing living things, that would include plants at some point. And
Yes.
if you have a moral shift between choosing not to kill animals because you can grow meat, it could very easily, in 100 years or 200 years, come to a moral decision of choosing not to kill plants when you could just grow fibers or proteins or carbohydrates or things like that.
Well, so in that world or in that case, when you're talking about plants, like growing synthetic plant material to eat and consume, and animals, which one do you think would be more complicated to make? The
In
fake
all
meat or
honesty,
fake
I
plant?
think animals are the hardest one. I think we're starting with the hardest one,
I'd agree with
because the
that one.
majority of plant, like the beauty of plant evolution, is its fractal development. It's grow a little
Yeah.
divide, grow a little divide, grow a little divide, and the structure's the same. Like the xylem and the phloem of a tree, the cells at the bottom of the tree and the cells at the top of the tree are exactly the same, and they're the same structure from bottom to top. So
Right.
replicating wood, replicating even just celery, right? Like you could just grow like a perfect chunk of celery. You wouldn't have to grow a plant and waste all the
Right.
water watering it, and you wouldn't have to waste fertilizer trying to build up an entire plant. You could literally just grow the part that people want. in the size they want,
True.
in the color they want it. Let's get some blue celery going. I'm ready. Let's go.
Can you imagine that, like synthetic celery that's like all the colors of the rainbow?
Designer
like
celery.
when you go to the store, yeah, right, designer celery. Like when you go buy, what are they called? The vegetable trays. You just have like a rainbow shape of celery and all the different colors. That'd be an interesting sight. Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Well, that's all cool stuff. Speaking of looking at the future, though, and if you have any questions relevant to the topics at hand, feel free to interject them my way. I don't want to fully direct the first half of the stream, as it were. But looking towards the future and with that scientifically minded perspective, how do you see schools changing? Since that's another field you're in.
Well, so with coronavirus happening, I think that is going to permanently change the landscape of schools, honestly. There are some schools, some colleges that are already talking about come November, they're not going to hold classes and they're going to do it virtually. I think that we are going to see a lot more virtual education come out of this. More so, like, there are kids out there who are something called homebound, which means that they can't come to school. Sometimes it's a medical reason. Teenage girls who give birth and then are, for about 8 weeks during maternity leave, they still have to do schoolwork, but they're homebound. So that can look like different things in different school districts. But for example, where I work, there's a counselor who will take that kid's work to the kid and spend several hours with her, in the case of maternity leave type stuff, a couple hours a week, trying to get all the material to that kid, which is usually about 7 classes, and you're talking about realistically like 20 hours of material and maybe like 2 to 4 hours, which is a lot for a kid. And I think that online learning and what it's now becoming and the access that we're starting to see may really move education in that direction. And there's some good and bad things with that. I know my kids really, really miss that interaction. They miss being in the classroom. And so I don't know that all kids would do that. And it's interesting to sort of see that, because as a teacher, like, there's a point where I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to deal with the kids for another week. But then you're like, I miss my kids, because they really are my kids.
Yeah.
They're our kids. So it's interesting to see. I think it'll shift it, though, some towards the online aspect, and that we'll see more kids going to virtual schools. But I don't think it's going to completely replace the classroom, and I don't know that we'll ever completely see the classroom be replaced based off of what we're seeing right now.
And I think that also is more of what this current time period is highlighting, is it's really showing what it is a teacher does and what it is a teacher doesn't necessarily need to do.
Right.
And, there's also to keep in mind, like, the social aspects. Like,
yes,
there's an obvious social difference between people who are homeschooled and people who went to, like, a public school, because that's another part of the child learning, is learning how to navigate a complex and diverse social field.
Right.
So, and teachers, having a physical presence in that environment help to kind of make sure that development is advantageous and not something that's kind of spiraling in on itself or otherwise causing problems further down the road.
Right. And it's not just social interactions like, oh, you're my friend. There's also the romantic relationships that you see with high schoolers. Like, I've had no less than 3 couples start dating in my classes, at least that I know of. And sometimes there's like a girl who's like comes in and she's really upset. I pull her aside, ask her what's going on, and she's telling me about all these boy problems that she's having with her boyfriend in the class with her. And so you're seeing stuff like that if you take the school building away, you don't have any of those interactions. Those kids aren't going to really interact with each other a whole lot. You're not going to see those relationships form, which for a lot of people, those relationships they have in high school, maybe middle school as well, or college, are really something that helps shape who they are and their ability to figure out what they want later in life. And so without that, I think that kids or young adults really at that point start really developing issues with relationships, not only romantic, but also like friendship wise and how to interact with people. We're already seeing the lack of social interactions affecting kids. That's just from like smartphone exposure.
Yeah, I would say the majority of my best friends were formed in academic areas. Obviously, now that I'm no longer in school, I'm developing those kind of best friendships without it. But there's a certain rapport, I think, and as you were saying, like a developmental aspect. My best friend on Twitch, their name's Serenity. I've known him since kindergarten, when we were 5 years old, and we've been best friends. He was the tallest kid. He was like 5'2" in kindergarten, and I was the shortest kid. I was like 4 foot nothing. And
yeah,
it was like that all the way. And then in high school, freshman year of high school, I was 5 foot. Senior year of high school, I was 6 foot. So that was like, it was literally like grew 6 inches each summer. It was kind of crazy.
That is crazy. No, my best friend, I met her in 6th grade. We had social studies together. She did not talk. She was actually born in Peru, and she moved to Texas at the age of, I think, 6 or 7. She has 2 younger siblings, 2 younger sisters. One was born in Peru, one was born in the U.S., I believe. But she didn't talk a lot, and a lot of that now as a teacher, I know that's because she was really bad at speaking English. Right. Like whenever she got told like she had to like answer something or do a presentation in class, she'd be like crying. She was so nervous and stuff like that. And I made it my mission in 6th grade to make her talk. And she's my best friend still to this day. Over half of our lives, we've been best friends. Like we went to different colleges. She became a nurse. She works at Texas Children's with like intensive care kids, intensive care babies, infants. But she's at the point now where she doesn't stop talking, and it's great to see that. But yeah, no, she's always been smaller than me, and I called her my little ice cube because her hands are always so cold. But yeah, she's my best friend, and I've been best friends with her since beginning of middle school, essentially. Like in 8th grade, we had almost all of our classes together. In high school, we really stuck together. We were both in orchestra for 7 years. Like we continued orchestra with each other because of that friendship. Really, like your best friend's doing it, you're going to do it as well, even if you're not necessarily in the same class. We did a lot of AP classes, not necessarily in the same room. In high school, a lot of the times we weren't in classes together, but we maintained that friendship, and that's something that I think virtual learning would remove. So,
and going along with that developmental thing, me and my best friend, we're those kind of people who we only need to see each other like once a year at most. And for most of the time, we don't need to say a word between the two of us just because we have that kind of a connection. And I think that comes from a shared view of the world, is kind of knowing how to look at something through someone else's eyes, those mirror neurons.
And even feeling
to have.
Yeah, even feeling comfortable to share viewpoints that you may not know or may not be aware of. So, like as I mentioned, my best friend, she was born in Peru. She didn't she didn't get her citizenship until she was in college, I think. At her bachelorette party that we had a few years ago, most of her friends are also immigrants. I'm like the token white girl at parties and stuff like that. It's sort of funny. Her husband's also white, and so we would always joke like we're the token white people at the party. And so for years it was that way. But so we were having like a really in-depth discussion one night, and it gets sort of political here, but talking about immigration and what that has meant over the last, like, let's just say 5 or 6 years, and how it's changed. And sort of some of the things that families have gone through who came here legally, and all of a sudden they became illegal because of the process that the United States uses
Right.
to get citizenship. And sort of hearing that was really interesting to me, because we also share some other friends who aren't necessarily Hispanic. So there are a few of us that are white there, and then there's a lot of Hispanic girls. And it's sort of interesting to hear that, this is something that I've gone through, even though this process is here and they make it sound like, you're always legal, you don't have to worry about being deported. But then all of a sudden this law goes through and all of a sudden you're illegal. Like, you can't take the citizenship test because it hasn't been 7 years.
Right.
But you've got da-da-da-da-da going on. So it's really interesting talking about similar viewpoints and stuff like that, so that you can also get some of those experiences that aren't the same and share them and feel safe about it. Because that's not something that most people are going to feel comfortable talking about. They're not going to want to talk about that with people that they don't know. So
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and there's I've looked at some research into language acquisition, just because I try to keep up with as many languages as I can. And most of the studies that have been done really show that there is no real age limit to language acquisition. The biggest factor is actually the environment that you're learning it in, because when you have a child, they're learning the language when they're in school, and they're learning the language when they're hanging around with their friends, and they're really only speaking their parents' native language when they're at home. And if you put an adult in that exact same situation, then you pretty much get the same result and the same speed of language acquisition. But it's because adults are more self-sufficient, they maintain connections with their friends and family that speak their native language in their home country, and they tend to kind of isolate themselves in a community of other people that speak the same language. And so it's kind of interesting when you see that your mindset is much more of a determination of your learning ability than how long you've been doing something or how old you are,
right? And there's different levels to language acquisition, and as you said, it's not really that if you're older you can't learn a new language, and I agree with that. I think it's more of, it makes it more difficult because of the circumstances, so it might take you longer. But at the same time, I have kids who've been in the US for 5 or 6 years, and they don't know that multiplicar means multiply in English. And it's like, I got to give you instructions in Spanglish for you to understand what I'm telling you to do. But you've been in the United States for 6 years, you're 18, you've been here since you were 12. It's not that, you're incapable, it's that you're not necessarily putting the effort into it. So, and then I have kids who've been here for 2 years that sound like they're getting close to fluent. So it's not just if you're a kid, it's easier. It's really, as you're saying, the environment you're putting yourself in.
So going along with that rationale, what is one thing? This is a two-parter question, and I'll give you $1,000 if you can guess what the second question is. The first question is, what's one thing you'd never change about schools?
What's one thing that I can what?
That you would never change.
That I would never change about schools.
And I'll give you $1,000 if you can guess what the follow-up question is.
Oh, the follow-up question is, what could you change about schools?
She got it. Man, how did she know?
I don't know. It's almost like my brain's logical. One thing I could would not change about schools. Okay. So probably that, I don't know, COVID's in my brain a lot lately. So I would hazard to say that in-person communication, that connection you get with the kids when you greet them at the door and you talk to them about stuff. A lot of the reason why I miss my kids right now isn't just because I miss seeing their face. It's because I miss having those conversations with them where they tell me about, they got a new job at Popeyes.
Right.
Or, they quit their job at Kroger or whatever it is. Where they talk to me about their family when they tell me my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and stuff like that. So missing those connections and going, hey, how are you doing today? and stuff like that. And so I would never want to change that because I feel like that's really important for humans to have that interaction and sort of develop that empathy for each other.
Right. Okay.
And support each other. Yeah.
And
so
if
one thing
I could participate in an answer as well.
Okay, yeah.
Same line of questioning, which is strange because I actually haven't really thought too much about this, but even though it was one of my questions I wanted to ask. And honestly, one thing I wouldn't change is in fact, I would actually encourage it more, is that extracurricular structure to school.
Yes.
I think kids having the choice as to what they want to be involved in, while obviously you need to make sure they're pushed to a broader understanding against their will, they still need to be able to explore their interests almost unreined. If you have someone who is a musical prodigy and all they want to do is music, and you're forcing them to spend 3 hours a day learning home economics and history and gym, you're doing a disservice to their development, because they could be spending that time furthering something they're very passionate about and very good at. So having those extracurricular activities where you're not regimented in the structure of a school schedule, and you can just, from 2 o'clock to dinner time, the child is free to explore this particular interest of theirs. I think that's actually a very critical point for a lot of kids.
I would definitely agree with that. In middle school and high school, I was in orchestra for 7 years. I stayed in orchestra because I enjoyed being in orchestra, not because I was good at it. As my mom and my dad and my sister can attest, I was not necessarily good at it. I mean, you develop the skills, but I didn't have a private tutor. I wasn't in the best of the orchestras. Right. I did it because I enjoyed it. I loved doing it. And it wasn't necessarily that I expected I was going to get a career out of it. So I didn't necessarily do a ton of practicing after school and stuff. I just enjoyed doing it. And honestly, I think that has really broadened my appreciation of music. My sister and I went to the same college. My sister was in band, I think, for like a year and a half.
Okay.
But in college, we had to take a music appreciation class at the college we went to, SFA. And we took it together. That was the only time I've ever been in a classroom, like, as a student with my sister.
Right.
Which is very weird. Because she's a few years older than I am.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so we took this class together. And a lot of it was like identifying a piece of music and the composer, which in my streams recently, I've gone to, listening to music off of my old iPods.
Yeah.
And some of that was actually the music from that class, ironically. So I'll listen to it and I'll be like, okay, yeah, this is so-and-so and this is so-and-so. But when we were in that class, my sister would get like so frustrated that I was so easily identifying stuff because some of the pieces that we were having to memorize, I'd played before with orchestra. Right. Yeah, and sort of like I was very inclined. I loved that class. My sister, not as much. I don't know that I would say she didn't like it, but she didn't love it.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I think that being in orchestra for so long really helped develop that. I was also in anime and manga club for 3 years, and I still like watching anime and stuff. So I think that helps develop that interest as well.
Okay.
And without it, I don't think I'd be nearly as into music as I am now. Like, I listen to a lot of music streams on Twitch.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny with how that music is kind of put in, because I was given a class like that too, and it I don't know how it was for you, but for me it was really just much like homework. Like, here's 20 songs, memorize the name and composers, and there'll be a quiz at the end of the month kind of thing. And I think the skills you develop in order to do that are really valuable, but those are skills that can be taught. It shouldn't be something left to the individual to figure out for themselves. So there's a lot of things to unpack. The reason you can listen to something and go, I think this is Beethoven. It's like, well, why do you think it's Beethoven? Right? And it shouldn't just be because I was forced to memorize this 20 years ago. It's
No,
because,
it's
well, the
yeah.
contrast and dynamics, and he has a very structured repeating of the motif, and he starts in a major and goes into the minor, and then he has the recapitulation back into major at the end. Like it has a
Yep.
Beethoven structure to it, and you can teach that,
Right.
but
Right.
people aren't going to figure that out on their own, just like
Right.
as a
Yeah.
homework
So
assignment.
and sort of relevant with that one, we actually did stuff. It was like chronological, so we had like 4 exams, and I think our last exam for sure, and maybe the last two, it was more of modern stuff. So one of the things that we had to, or one of the composers that we were looking at was Danny Elfman. Another one was Hans Zimmerman.
Okay.
I can hear music in a movie and go, that's Hans Zimmerman's music,
Yep.
without ever seeing any credits, never hearing the song before, and be like, that's Hans Zimmerman. Like
Yep.
it's
Yep.
fairly dissonant. Or this one's Danny Elfman because it's so dissonant. You're like, it's like, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah, for sure.
Danny Elfman. And sort of John Williams the same, but I've enjoyed the John Williams stuff for years and years and years, well before that class. I actually played some of it in orchestra. So, but yeah, music, love it.
Yeah,
Oh.
and for me, it's a bit the other way around because I was much more familiar with like 50s and 60s music and then going into 70s
Yeah.
rock and then classical and jazz and then kind of like appreciation of cinema. So by the time I was like getting into actual critiquing and understanding cinema, I would hear Hans Zimmerman like, well, this is just New World Symphony and Holst. Like this is like there's a
Yeah.
like that's how I know it's Hans Zimmer. So I was like, oh, that sounds like Holst, but it's in a movie, so it's Hans Zimmer. Like, it's like this is like
That's funny.
and I'm not trying to take credit away from cinematic composers.
Though they
'Cause-
draw a lot
right,
on
and they have to because you can't just be a Beethoven for a movie. It doesn't work that way.
Right,
Right,
no. It might work
so-
for marbles, but it doesn't work for a movie. Have you ever tried that, like putting classical music to marbles while you're rolling them, and like you can slow them
done
down
it
and
for a
stuff?
while. I've done some piano concertos
Okay.
and things like that. And for speaking of Holst, with the Marble Centauri, if you do that with Jupiter, it works really good. And if you do it with Uranus, it works really well. So those two
I
go
just
really
like
well.
playing. Yeah, I just like playing Space Oddity, the cover by Commander Chris Hadfield, the one he did on the space station.
Right, right, right.
With that particular one, though, I think Standard Damage likes to do that song to Space Station,
Yeah.
but I'm sort of like, Space Station's a little long for that. But
I guess. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, they
It's
shortened it with
technically
the funnel,
more
but-
accurate. I mean,
Yes, yes, and
there.
I'm meh about the Space Station map. Like it's neat, but I don't find it super interesting.
Yeah,
I
it'd
love
be
Marble
cool if the
Centauri.
marbles went through the gravitic spiralers.
Yes, if you're not just like straight
Yeah,
shot
just shoot
through.
it. In
Right.
classic pitfall of cinematographic map creation. I'm gonna make something that looks really cool, and we're gonna go right by it. It's like
That's
whoops.
that's part of the reason I think I like Marble Centauri so much, because the moon rotates around the Earth and it changes, and then you actually go around Mars and you go underneath Jupiter and all that stuff. Marble Centauri 2 is my favorite map of the standard ones. It might be I don't know about all-time favorite, but it's definitely my favorite standard map. And so anytime someone's like, okay, we're gonna vote, I'm like, vote 15, vote 15, vote 15.
Don't even have to look it up. That's the
No, I
problem.
don't, yeah.
I love Portal Alley, but I can never remember that it's number 47. Like I always have to like wait and stare at the screen. Like, is it 47? Is it 47? And like sometimes
Right.
like the vote's over before it even scrolls out. I'm like, damn it!
Right. And so, yeah, for a long time I was like, is it vote 13, 14, or 15? Which one is it? Which one is it? And then once I actually like saw it, I'm like, I need to commit that. It's always 15, always 15, always 15.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always like, vote 15. I got to see Marble Centauri 2. I'll never get tired of that map. It's a gorgeous map.
And then lurching back out of the rabbit hole that we seem to have fallen down.
Yes,
in.
yes.
Part 2 of the
Okay.
question at hand.
Part 2.
What's one thing
What-
you would
what-
change?
One
about
thing
school?
I would change about school. So many things.
Can you form a more blanket description to incorporate more than one specific thing, perhaps?
Give me a second here. So, to preface this, I've worked in 3 different school districts at 3 different schools, like as a paid employee. That's not counting like internships and student teaching and stuff. And those 3 school districts, the one I spent 4 years in that I was in up until this school year, was extremely different from the first one I worked in and the one I work in right now. Those 2 are actually fairly similar, where there's a lot more autonomy for teachers and stuff like that. But one thing that I would definitely want to change about the education system or teaching, like let's
I would say the system itself, because the
system
teaching's
itself,
really
okay.
up to the teacher, I would say.
Right. So the education system itself. I would have to say probably how schools structure, not all schools, but some of them structure teams. So teachers work in teams. Like all the physics teachers work together, the chemistry teachers work together and stuff like that.
Okay.
One thing that my previous school district did very well, and it was more of our specific team did really well, is we worked very well together. We met on a regular basis. We would use the same PowerPoint. We would use the same assignments from room to room. We would even be doing them at the same time. So we actually had our principal was doing walkthroughs in classrooms, and she walked through 3 chemistry classrooms, and it was like literally picking up the lesson into another room, which like each teacher is going to deliver it in a slightly different way.
Right.
But making sure that the students are accessing the same material, I think, is very important.
Right.
The district I work in right now, the team I'm on, I teach principles of technology, which is like the Texas version of dummy physics, essentially, is how it's been made, what it's been made into. That's not what it was initially meant to be, but that's what it's turned into. And I'm on the team with all the physics teachers. Well, I teach physics, but I don't teach the same physics course they do. I'm teaching it by myself. The other 6 teachers are all just teaching regular physics. And so one thing that I hear, because my neighbor is a physics teacher as well, and it drives her bonkers that the team does not work together. Because she came from a school that had good planning, like a good cohesion with their team.
Right.
Well, let me rephrase that. She came from a school that had a team that worked together. They weren't necessarily cohesive, but they worked together. And it drives her crazy to come into a school and have, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. Like,
Right.
just squirrel. Like, it's not the same assignments. Like, they give the same test, and that's the only thing that's the same. And I think that it benefits the students a lot as well as the teachers when they're using the same material. And a lot of school districts don't have teachers do that, and they, throw it under the rug as like, oh, this is, teacher independence. Like, you have the right to do whatever you need to or want to do in your classroom in the way of instruction and how you want to present it and stuff like that. And they're very much like, oh yeah, this is like, we're giving you independence. But I think really what it does is it hinders development and growth of not only the teachers, but the students as well. And so I think it's something called PLC, which is like professional learning communities is what they call them.
Okay.
So having PLCs be more of a standard and somehow like actually checked on, I think would be helpful. And I think part of the issue is that no one in the system necessarily knows what they're doing with it. And so they just sort of throw something at it and go, oh, we're sort of doing this. So we do this and this and this. And I'm just sitting here like, this is not a PLC. Please tell me I'm not teaching physics with you guys next year. Because if I am, me and the neighbor teacher and the other new teacher to the team this year, the three of us going to be doing some team planning, and the four of y'all going to be going off like crazy squirrels.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I would say, planning instruction a little bit more cohesively.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to ask you that question, is because you're coming from the other side of it, right? Pretty much anyone in a academic perspective is either viewing it as a student or as a parent. And you don't always hear academics as viewed by the teacher very often.
Yeah.
Because my basic approach as far as where schools need the most improvement from my student perspective is they need to reduce emphasis on regurgitation and foster more critical skill, as it were. So, like,
and
yes, you do need to know how to memorize things, and especially stuff for like history or sociology, you're going to have to do that kind of regurgitation to some extent. But when it comes to things like science, when it comes to things like even more artistic stuff like home ec or music theory, it's more important to know how to get through things than just have a bunch of stuff memorized. Because in this day and age, you can just look stuff up. You don't need to memorize it. But that also then requires you to have the skill to know what you're looking up is correct or not correct. And that's another thing you could be teaching in schools.
Right. And along those lines, though, one of the things that planning as a team can do is you're essentially taking the burden of planning everything and you're dividing it amongst the team, which means that when you do that, you get more opportunities to approach things from a different angle. So you get a more of an opportunity to approach different learning modalities, which is how people learn, such as visual, audio, kinesthetic, which is like doing things, stuff like that. And so you have more ideas out there, you're sharing those ideas and you're planning together, which means that if I want to teach a lesson over friction, okay, great, we have these PowerPoint notes. Great, we shouldn't be spending all of our time on that. What else can we do? Oh, well, we have these friction boards. All right, so let's take a block and let's have the kids drag it across and tell them to try on different sides of the block. Maybe there's different surfaces, like this one's wooden, this side has felt on it. Drag it across these different things and have the kids come up with explanations about it. Okay, now they're getting to actually play with something and do something. All right, so now we're addressing different modalities of learning and stuff like that. And you don't necessarily get that if you're only planning for your classroom, if you're not talking to anyone. So I think that helps expand the experience for the students. And without it, it's all of a sudden, okay, well, I've got to plan everything. And teachers get very overwhelmed. We spend a lot of time at school, not with the kids in the room. There have been days where I spend longer at school without the kids than I do with the kids, where I'm at school for 14 or 16 hours a day and the kids aren't even in there for most of that. And so, like, it gets very overwhelming to be like, okay, well, I'm going to plan these notes. I'm going to have this practice worksheet, and then we're going to be doing this lab, and I got to get these things prepped for this week, and I've got to make copies, and I've got to do this and this and this. And then that's where teachers sort of lose some of that rigor, where you're talking about like developing critical thinking skills and the ability to like look stuff, like if you're talking English or history, maybe it's like writing an essay. Well, now your teacher's got to grade it and stuff like that. Oh gosh, I hate writing assignments because then I have to read some of the things the kids write, and sometimes there's some gold nuggets in there, but a lot of time you're just like, you Googled this, it's word for word, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that team planning actually has like a trickle down effect. So it starts at the top with the actual planning bit, but then it changes how you're presenting stuff.
Right.
It changes how the kids are getting exposed to it. It changes how well the kids retain it, how much they enjoy the class, how well they do in the class. And so it's sort of like, this is the thing at the top that's causing a lot of these different issues. And so if you fix it here, it helps everything down here. And the parents only see the base. They don't see what's happening at the top. Yeah.
I feel educated, I must say. I feel educated. So you've done a good job. All right. Well, I think at this point, my line of questioning is going to probably take a sharp turn and deviation from this. Do you have anything still relevant to the conversations at hand that you wanted to get to?
I had some questions about your college experiences, but I don't know
Oh,
where we're going next.
but we could do that. We could do that.
Okay. So you've mentioned before that you went to college to study entomology, which is the study of insects.
Hmm.
Okay. What did you want to do in that field, or were you just interested in the topic?
Yeah, what I wanted to do was insect behavior,
Okay.
in the specific field of integrated pest management is the field. And the idea of integrated pest management is you don't spray a generalized insecticide on 100 acres of land. You create a host environment for predators of your pest in half an acre in a strategic spot in that land. And then you have a selective plant pressure against the host in a border around your 100 acres. And you strategically release supporting animals or plants at certain times of the year to further discourage those particular pests. And in order to do that successfully and monetarily viably, you need to have a full understanding of the life cycles of the pests you're dealing with. And so my interest most specifically was in behavioral entomology. And the briefest example I can give that was one of the earliest things that caught my imagination is watch a butterfly fly. It is the most erratic and sporadic flight path of pretty much anything that flies. And yet something like a monarch butterfly, with as goofy and discombobulated as its flight is, manages to get from Canada to Mexico. How? Right? What behaviors are guiding that flight, and what behaviors is it using to navigate? Right? And
Hmm.
there's research on it, and insects have different eyes, and some eyes see polarized light so they can see the magnetic field of the earth. Other eyes can see infrared, others can see ultraviolet, all depending on what insects you're dealing with. But it's stuff like that that really gets me thinking, because like how does a butterfly avoid a predator, right? If it's flying like that, or is that why it flies the way it does? Is because it has needed to avoid birds that have this pinpoint precision accuracy. It's developed an erratic flight pattern, so you can't predict where it's going to go. Because like something like a bat, for example, is very good at the trigonometry of flight. And so
Hmm.
a bat or even an owl in the same situation, they do like dark light tests where they have like a blacked out room and they set a flying prey loose in the room, and then they watch the behavior of the predator, whether it's the bat or the owl. And they don't just fly at the target, they fly in front of the target, and they create these collision trajectories that, air traffic controllers would be jealous of. Like, they're doing good work.
Yeah.
And like, so maybe that's part of why a butterfly evolved that flight, or maybe it's just not a good way of flying. Maybe in order to be able to fly, they have to have a certain wing ratio to body weight ratio, and they're kind of out of proportion, or that's the only way they could get flight going, and it's just not pretty. So that's stuff I would be interested in sorting out, trying to come up with some tests to do in the field to see if there's a way to get to the bottom of that. And
Find the. Co-
that goes in with pest management. I don't know if you've heard
Mhm.
about the work in Africa that Bill Gates has been doing, but he employed a team of hackers to analyze and break down the life cycle and ecosystem that mosquitoes are in. And the reason he employed hackers is because hackers know how to break a system down into all of its key components and how to
Mhm.
test each of those systems for weaknesses. And so if you're trying to handle something like malaria in Africa,
Mhm.
you need that kind of a mind that can say, okay, this is what is a mosquito as an egg, this is what a mosquito is as a larva, as a pupa, when it gets to its first instar, when it gets to its last instar, this is a mosquito as an adult. And one of the techniques they're developing right now is that the frequency that male and female mosquitoes fly at are different. And while the male mosquito has a frequency similar to a lot of other insects, the female mosquito does not. It has a very unique frequency that it flies at, the beat of its wings. And so they developed a program that could identify the frequency, and they developed a laser that could be targeted at a triangulated location of a frequency. And further beyond that, the laser isn't like a cooking laser where it's going to, burn a kid that runs by it at the wrong time. It's actually the specific wavelength that will match the mosquito's wing. So it's a wavelength that's going to like melt the insect's wing because it's the same wavelength as the wing, and the wing just like crumples. And if a mosquito flies into the field, it gets detected by the frequency, and then the laser frequency matches the wing beat and fries the wings, and the female mosquito drops down. And those are the ones you want to hit because the male mosquitoes aren't going to prey on humans.
Right, because it's females that bite, right?
And that's kind of the idea, is like you don't need to spray Agent Orange over the entire country for 2 months. You could just figure out that a female mosquito has a very specific wing pattern, and if you fire a laser at this frequency at the wings just crumple and they can't fly anymore. And then voila, you done did it. And Can't Place, thank you for the raid. Welcome to the show. This is Losing Our Marbles with GoTeach, and you came at a good time because I think at this point we're about an hour in, and it's time for the midstream mix-up. I'm working on an overlay, guys. It'll happen. I'm telling you, it's gonna happen. The midstream mix-up's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Just not right now. So just pretend there's some big fancy visual overlay that just triggered off. And everyone's impressed. Everyone's like, ooh, wow, that looks so good. How did you do that? And I'm actually going to close this window because there's some obnoxious noises that have been coming inside for the first half of the stream. And hopefully you guys haven't been hearing it, because when it got too loud, I muted myself. And generally, I think it's been below threshold. But just for the sake of security, I'm going to take a quick 2-second break to close that window. And we'll get into the midstream mix-up. Thank you all for being here, and we will be right back. Okay, and we're in. All right.
It's quieter.
As previously discussed, GoTeach and I have a healthy relationship of going back and forth with nitpicking scientific endeavors. And I thought it would be fun for the midstream mix-up to do a little demonstration for y'all of what it really means when two scientific minds get together in a clash of the titans.
Oh, gosh.
And I thought it'd also be good to demonstrate just some practical skills that people generally don't use often enough in this day and age. So here's the challenge, ladies and gentlemen. GoTeach and I have prepared some facts for one another. Now, these facts could be true. They could be false. One could be true. One could be false. Both could be false. Both could be true. Only the provider of the fact knows. But here's the thing. The other person has no idea what those facts are going to be. And they will have very little time to figure it out in real time here on the stream. And out of courtesy, I will volunteer to be the first victim.
Okay.
So GoTeach.
So yeah, we discussed finding. Where's my post-it note about that? Yeah, nope, that's the wrong one. Anyway, something along the lines of relevant, vague facts. Yeah. And so I didn't necessarily go so much with the scientific stuff.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
pushing my comfort zone. I like it. Let's do it.
Yeah, I had to do a bit of research for mine. So the first one for you is something that surfaced earlier this year, and it says something along the lines of a Simpsons episode from 1993 predicted COVID and murder bees.
Oh. Okay. So here's the challenge, ladies and gentlemen. I will have whatever time I would deem no longer interesting to the chat, which is to say, if I take like 20 minutes to do this, it's not going to be very entertaining. So I'm going to try to keep it quick and fast, which means accuracy will be sacrificed. But the idea is, can I fact check this in real time without taking forever? So the fact in question is: did The Simpsons predict COVID-19 and murder bees specifically together?
Bees. Yes, together in an episode from 1993.
Okay. Step one in my process: let's find the thing in question. All right. Internet search, CNN, Forbes, WTHR. Now I've already seen this clip, so I have a leg up on the thing here. But let's go with the New York Post, because they're not reliable, but they're very viral, and therefore it's going to be very, very attributive to how they do it.
Oh, that is backwards.
Why, the only cure is bed rest. Anything I give you would only be a placebo.
Where do we get these placebos?
Maybe there's some in this truck.
Okay. Well, that said killer bees, not murder hornets. So already potentially not correct. And I don't think that's the clip that was in question. The question is this one, I think, which is going to be a little longer. This is full episode. We don't have time for a full episode. Let's see if we can find the clip correctly. There it is. That's got to be the clip.
Please don't tell the supervisor I have the flu.
I've been working with a shattered pelvis for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Oh, my juice loosener's never gonna come.
Hey, Dad, this came for you in the mail.
Woohoo!
Okay, and then it goes into the bees thing, right?
Mother,
Okay.
get an extra special hug ready.
All right.
I bought you a new...
As far as I can tell from the clip itself, did it predict it? No. This has used the old Nostradamus technique of close enough. Be vague enough that it's close enough. Some details I would consider nullifying of the predicting power. One, the episode's called Osaka Flu, which Osaka is Japan, not China. So they didn't even get the country of origin right. Secondly, likely not transmitted initially by shipping, but rather by human beings. So human beings traveling to and from China rather than shipments being traveled to and from China. So both origin and delivery method likely not accurate, if not completely wrong. And then it was killer bees, which I'm assuming is referencing the Africanized honeybee, not the murder hornets. And the murder hornets, interestingly enough, are from Japan, and killer bees are actually from America. They were a hybridization of an African honeybee and an American honeybee that went terribly wrong. So there's a lot of vagaries that go in the wrong direction to our current situation. And if I may just post as a public service, you're not going to see a murder hornet this year. Maybe 5-10 years you will start seeing murder hornets if the situation does not get controlled, but you will not see them. And the reason I'm saying that is because there is a native wasp that is the same size as a murder hornet but looks entirely different, but to an untrained eye is just another big hornet. And that's called the cicada killer wasp. And the cicada killer wasp, you would literally have to hold against your skin for a couple seconds to get it to sting you. It's a very passive and conflict avoidant insect. And they're actually very important to the ecosystem in the Americas. So if you're going around killing murder hornets, you're probably killing cicada killer wasps. And you're doing a lot more harm than even the murder hornets are doing. So please understand, you're not going to see murder hornets this year. And probably not for a couple of years, if ever, depending on how our response to it is. So, did they predict it? No. But did the episode exist? Yes.
So first of all, with the insect point that you brought up, very good. Because even with the regular, like, red wasp, people can't tell the difference between that and a mud dauber, which doesn't sting you. And that's something that I dealt with a lot when I worked at Girl Scout camp, because we would have mud daubers building nests on our dock for canoeing and stuff at our lake. But we very rarely saw wasps. Now, they were around, but it was a good teaching moment for the kids. Like, no, this insect is fine. Leave it alone. It's not going to hurt you. We like this one. We don't like that one. But as far as the episode goes, it is false. One of the clips that I think you sort of saw but didn't watch all the way was with him talking to a crowd of people and then they go push over the van.
Yeah.
That's actually from 2 different episodes.
Ah, so it's even more inaccurate than I...
Right. So something you said, Forbes actually breaks it down where they talk about like they went into the video and actually looked at it and saw it was edited. I think there was a CNN article and a New York Post article that were essentially treating it like the clip was proof and then going into like all the particulars, sort of like what you were talking about. But the Forbes article actually goes in and says, hey, look, this was edited, and shows like 2 different episodes that it came from.
Got it.
So, yeah, there is a lot of inaccuracies when you're talking about the actual transmission of the Osaka flu versus COVID. And then obviously you're talking about a different type of insect. But the Osaka flu, that fictional virus, was actually modeled after a flu from 1968. And yeah, there's like an interview with one of the writers who talks about like, well, these things keep popping up. Like we use
History
material
repeating
from...
itself.
Right. Like, and there's been all sorts of stuff in the news about the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic compared to what's going on now. So once again, like it's just actually a more recent one than 1918. It's just a different pandemic that they were modeling it after. And I mean, if you're talking about a viral pandemic, I mean, they're going to look fairly similar. The symptoms will be different. But just the idea of, we're predicting flu and, killer insects, not even from the same episode.
Yeah. So there we go. Proof in the demonstration, as it were. And 71, thank you for the raid very much. Welcome to Losing Our Marbles. We are currently in the midstream mix-up. We are we are pushing our fact-checking skills to the test right now. I would say I got a 50% on that one. I don't think I correctly or specifically identified enough that they were not even the same episode. So I'm going to give myself 50% on that one. Now to return fire. And I said don't get too like strangely specific. And I feel like I'm on the edge of this with this one. So if you want to pass on this one, we can pass on this one. But I felt like it was general enough that it'd be interesting to get into. The Philippines are inhabited by people and have been inhabited by people for a very long time. Before anything anyone would consider modern nautical engineering. And it was just assumed by stereotypically enough looks alone that it was Asians that had colonized the Philippines. But recent scientists have been pushing and are now arguing that it was Americans that settled. And I'm not talking United States of America Americans. I'm talking like actual Americans that settled the Philippines. And
like Native Americans?
Yes, real Americans. And so I'm not gonna say that. I guess for the sake of the demonstration, I'll orchestrate it as a fact, and then you can go from there. So the fact in question is the Philippines were settled by Americans and not Asians.
Okay. And you're saying like Native Americans?
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. So let's see. I wonder if I can do a screen share. Let me see if I can do this.
Ooh,
oh gosh.
We're getting technical. You probably
There's
could actually, because I'm capturing you through the Discord. So.
Right. So give me a second to see if I can do this.
There's usually a window option and a screen option. So if you did the screen option, that's usually more reliable.
Yeah. Screen. Oh, okay. Entire screen. Nope. I don't want that one.
And you have to scroll down to see the other screens. It's really it's badly formatted.
Yeah.
It took me about 10 minutes looking at what?
I've used it before, but not recently. Alrighty.
Right. I'm gonna flip your camera real quick. It's fine.
Yeah. So who originally colonized the Philippines is what I'm going to look up. So right off the bat, like Wikipedia is nice and everything. It gives you a good idea, but it's not like a really reliable source because anybody can edit it. I like looking at the .edu stuff. So that's like an educational institution, which tend to be a lot more reliable. Let's see. Philip claimed in the name of Spain in 1521, explorers sailing from Spain. But we're talking about who colonized it.
Who initially inhabited it?
Oh wait, who initially? Okay, so who? Origin of the Filipino? I'm not spelling this right.
Filipinos with an F. It's very strange.
Oh, okay. Filipino race? I don't know. 2 theories on inhabitants. First, okay.
Oh, there it is. Evolution theory and
.org.
migration theory. Oh, man.
.org. PhilippineHistory.org. So before I even go into this, what in the world? Get rid of that ad. So a lot of times when I want to figure out if I'm not sure about a website, I'll actually go look at something about the website, like who is it? What is
Right.
this PhilippineHistory.org website? And I don't see anything. Okay, they got I swear there's ads popping up everywhere. Presidents
That's
and
always
vice
a bad
presidents.
sign.
Yeah. Well, there's like little windows. Okay. What is this in the beginning? No, I want to. Who's presidents and VPs? Oh, this is presidents of them. I don't know about this. I'm not sure about this one. So if I find anything on here, I'm going to want to like look it up somewhere else, first of all. 3rd century island were in contact and trading with East Asian sea farmers of Luzon. I don't know what Luzon is. Is that one of the islands?
Mm-hmm.
Largest island, okay. So they were already trading in the 3rd century? Ooh. During the American era. So Spanish and colonial times.
But who were they trading with?
East Asian sea farmers and merchants, including the Chinese and the Japanese. On his voyage to explored the islands and named it Rebellion, pointed. Okay, so let's try a different site.
I agree. I don't think that one's reliable.
Britannica.
Ooh.
I do like me some
A credible source.
I do like me some Encyclopedia Britannica. Something that I did during the school year was each day I did a scientist of the day type thing, Encyclopedia Britannica. Primo source for me. World War II. So okay, this is in chunks, I guess. Major treatment. Oh, okay. How about, I'm going to open a new tab. Settlement of the... There you go, that one. That's what I should have looked up the first time. Nations Online Project. First permanent settlement in 1565.
That sounds a bit European biased right there.
Yep. Because then there's the question of was it a settlement from foreign lands, but who were the natives?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one pops up again. Settlement process, immigration history. What the heck is that?
Geriatrics.
Geriatrics, yeah. Historyworld.net. All right, so let's go back to this one. Let's see what we got. Japan. More people. Mario Wars. So, what about, like, at the beginning, though? This one's hard. So, you were saying that it was originally colonized by Native Americans.
Initially inhabited, yeah.
Initially inhabited. Yeah, see, I don't think settlement's the right word to use here.
No. Word choice is very important.
History of the Philippines, no. Ooh, what was that? Philippine. I saw that one. Where did it go? Philippines timeline. That's actually probably a good way to word it. Timeline. Key events in the history of the Philippines. BBC. Fairly reliable. See, they start with Spanish expedition. Claims the islands, but not necessarily saying that they were the first people there.
What if we did like origin of Filipinos?
Ooh, origin of Filipinos. I like that.
There we go. The Filipino
There we go.
race.
There's Filipino language. Filipinos. See, when we come back to this one.
Okay. Maybe there's
Which we
maybe there's a study if we went to the Wikipedia.
The Wikipedia. Oh,
Maybe
Wikipedia.
there's a cited study.
Yes, that would be helpful. I feel like you're leading me in the direction for the answer.
Like it borders on being a little unfairly specific. But
Yeah.
I think it's a good demonstration nonetheless of the kind of
Because I
process.
do like to look at Wikipedia and go, where did you get this information from?
KJH Boot says try the ancient peoples.
Ooh, I might try that one instead. Because the one thing about Wikipedia is it's a lot of information to sift through.
Yeah. I like how the chat's like getting in on it. This is cool.
If I can spell. Oh, hey, look, here we go.
There
This
you go.
is like a little bit
Prehistory
more
of the
helpful.
Philippines. Again, another very European biased term. But that might be
Right.
getting closer to the right direction. Prehistory,
Prehistory.
before people were keeping history, because the Filipino
Prior-
culture has no history at all.
Oh, here you go. Right, written history. Gosh. Okay.
look at
first
that.
one, let's see. Fair notice is conducting several hominids. Hominin came from bone. These finds did not trace direct pictures of animals. Da 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 da. Hominin remains. Fossils discovered 7. Stone Age.
50,000 BC.
Like I don't even know that you would say Native Americans at that point. Like if you're gonna go with like, what do you consider human here? First
Oh, that-
humans. What are the
see?
first humans here?
And that's a good question.
Because based off of what I'm seeing here, forget like Native Americans versus, the Spanish versus whoever. Like we're at this point talking like Asian immigrants across, land bridges.
Yeah. So looks like at the bottom there we have migration theories, Byers
Yes.
wave, objections to the land bridge theory, diffusion
Oh, yeah.
theory.
Lots of theories.
Yeah. So
I don't know that any of
in
these
your
are actually
professional opinion, when you
theories.
see this many theories, what would be your conclusion?
I would say based off of the fact with the fossils of different time periods, and I know we are looking at Wikipedia, but there were some other things about different not websites, but like different what's the word I'm looking for? Different theories that we were seeing in other places. And I highly, highly, highly doubt that the Spanish were the first group of people to enter an area full of islands. Like, that does not make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, at all. Like, I don't think that it was necessarily Native Americans either, because of the technology to traverse wide open oceans and their ability to do that. I would say that neither the Spanish nor the Native Americans were the first to live in the Philippines, the first humans in the Philippines.
Yeah. And as far as I've actually done a little bit more research on it, and there's actually there's an interesting movie of a It's kind of like a documentary of a scientist who kind of put his money where his mouth was. And he went to South American tribes to kind of learn their ancient way of ship making. And they actually had a model in their history of a rather large ship, like 20 meters by 20 meters raft with like a little hut in the middle. And he actually sailed from South America to the Philippines successfully to prove it was possible. But as demonstrated in that article, there's theories upon theories upon theories, and the fossil record indicates at least going back 50,000 years, there have been people there. So we don't know. And that's the point. We don't know. And sometimes that's the biggest thing you can learn from a fact check is that there is no fact.
Right.
We check the fact that it turns out there is no fact. Yeah. We don't fucking know. And that's
I can say we know that the Spanish were not the first humans there. That's for sure. So
they were not the beginning of Filipino history.
Right. Maybe written history, because maybe they brought written language to the area, but that is not the beginning of a civilization or a history. Like Native Americans didn't write in the way that we think of writing nowadays. Like they had what was more considered like, think of storybook pictures on a wall.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there wasn't a culture, a civilization, a bunch of cultures and a bunch of civilizations that were there for thousands of years before Europeans came along.
Awesome.
So
I think the mystery mix-up has been successful. I think we've done a damn good job. Just out of curiosity, what was your audible? Your second fact.
My other one. Women professional soccer players earn less than their male counterparts. That one's a little bit easier.
Ooh. I would say it's true, but then you have to, and that's what I was going to get to with mine. My second one was the pen was developed 1,000 years before the pencil. And both of those kind of touch on the same thing. And the question is, what are your definitions, right? Because if your definition of pen and pencil is an ink writing versus a charcoal writing, well, clearly the pencil was developed way before the pen, because cavemen were using charcoal to write down stuff all the time, way before they even started using inks of any kind.
And pencils actually use what we call lead is not actually lead. It's actually
graphite.
Carbon. Yeah, graphite, which is carbon, which charcoal, it's also carbon.
Right.
So
it really depends on your definitions, and that's where I was going to kind of go with responding to that is, what is your definition of earn less? Because they may earn less, but it could also be that less people watch it. And maybe they actually earn more per person watching than their male counterparts do. It depends on your definition,
salary.
Right? So
just straight up salary.
Do they play more? Are more people watching? Like, what are all the factors you would put into that calculation?
Well,
but I would say just
that's
numbers, they definitely earn less. Yeah.
So on that one, I don't know if you want me to expound on it some.
Sure.
Yeah. So women's soccer players have different contracts than the male soccer players. And I was mainly sticking to the U.S. because that's, what we have more experience with. But in the United States, women's soccer is actually more popular than men's soccer. I don't know if you knew that. National
considering
stage,
the World Cup, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Our women's soccer players are better than our men's soccer players. But the women actually earn less. They get performance bonuses. But even like, you would have to be like peak performance year round to compete with the male salaries. So women's salaries are like 38% less than the male salary.
Right.
For a sport that actually probably at the national stage anyway, for women earns more.
Right. And it's not even an audience discrepancy because they actually have a larger audience.
Right. Well, yeah, especially this was, I think, pertaining mainly to the U.S. Cup team.
Yeah, the World Cup teams, the men's World Cup team versus the women's World Cup team. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah.
Stuff. Fact checking, guys. It doesn't have to take forever.
Right.
You can find some really good stuff pretty quickly, and it's more about knowing what you want to do. So,
Yep.
Check your facts.
Yep.
Cite
your sources.
Cite your sources. Check your facts. Is that so? All right. This is going to bring us into the second half of the stream, and thank you again, GoTeach, for being here. Great having you. I've kind of led the discussion so far in the first half, and as is customary on our long-running history of 1.5 episodes, I'm going to allow you to more strongly direct the second half of the stream in the direction you choose.
Okay. So first question I got for you. What got you into Twitch?
What got me into Twitch specifically was Grimlust. Grimlust is a man, a very unique man. I don't know how many of you have ever played a MMO of some kind. And there's that one person you're trying to defeat and you just never can. And they're using every tactic you hate and you think they're being very unsportsmanlike. And they keep saying things like, don't hate the player, hate the game, or what are you going to do about it, or I'm not breaking any rules. You know those people? He's the epitome of that person. He will do whatever it takes to win, no matter how despicable, no matter how aggravating and infuriating it may be, because if it's in the game, it's in the game. I'm just playing the game better than you are, and just because you don't like it means nothing to me, right? And he's actually a quite lovable chap. But I found him when I was just kind of playing around with YouTube and everything like that. And he and I started working on his YouTube videos together. And he was streaming. So I was like, well, I think it'd be cool if we streamed together. And so we did some streams together. We have, for whatever reason, he is so much worse at Hearthstone than I am. But every time we played, he would always win. And it would always be luck of the draw. It'd always be some silly thing going on where, like, he's at 1 health, I'm at 20, I've got complete board control, but he draws the last card of his combo the turn before I can kill him, and he just, wipes me out. Or he only has 1 weapon in his deck, but he draws it in his starting hand, and he just smacks me in the face till I'm dead, right? Like, just the luckiest, dumbest plays. So it's always something like that with him, and he's very lovable in how it goes, as long as you understand where he's coming from. And that kind of goes into my appreciation of game theory, right? If you want to get better at something, you need to break it down as if it were a game. What are the rules? And if the rules are vague, then there's a lot you can do, right? So if you look at, like, checkers versus Monopoly, Monopoly says that, and it's been a while since I've ruled it, but it's something along the lines of the rules of negotiating. And I can't remember if it is that negotiations are always binding or never binding, but there's a manipulation in there, right? If the negotiations are always binding, then you can get a catch-22 on someone. Or if they're never binding, then you can promise the moon and never follow through. And as despicable as both of those things are, it's in the rules of the game. And if you're trying to win the game at any cost, then those are things you can manipulate into your advantage. And that can translate into life a little bit too, especially with streaming on Twitch. What are the rules of Twitch? Well, there's a lot of rules in Twitch, but also a lot of them aren't enforced until you're a certain size. So I do song requests, and I play songs that I should not be playing on Twitch. And if I were Dr. Disrespect, I would have my channel banned for a week. But until I'm that size and until it's a problem, I can manipulate that to my advantage. And once it becomes a problem, I can then work around it and continue onward. And, at that point, music will probably be a much less substantial factor in my streaming anyway, so I wouldn't even care that I can't use the music anymore, and I'll just move on. So there's always that idea of understanding what something is at a very fundamental level, and that's going to inform you as to what you can and can't do. And if you don't know if you can or can't do it, try it, right? Like, what's the worst that happens? Oh no. So that's kind of what got me into Twitch, is Grimlust and his way of viewing game theory. And I was casual streamer for a very long time, just doing it as buddies hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
But last year in June, I decided that I was going to stream full time, and I've committed to that ever since. And I know I talked about this a little bit on Jamie's podcast, but if you're going to commit to full-time streaming, the idea is that you're a full-time streamer. And the advantage is you have a set, reliable schedule that you build a habit in your viewers with. If you do not maintain that schedule, you are not building that habit with your viewers, and you might as well not be full-time and just stream whenever the hell you want. So if you want to full-time stream on Twitch, you need to come up with a plan, you need to come up with a schedule, and the only reason you ever change either of those two things is because something's not working. Not because you just don't feel like it that day, or it's too much and you can't keep going with it. So need to make sure that if you are going to go full-time streaming, you know what you're getting into and you have a plan going into it and you stick to that plan. And then you can change it afterwards as you see what is working and isn't working.
Not a full-time streamer.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you've chosen not to be a full-time streamer. And
I do it for fun.
Right.
I do it for fun. And I do have a schedule of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but I don't adhere to it so much in the last year.
twitch.tv/GoTeach.
Yeah, I don't adhere to it so much. For example, last night I didn't stream because I was dealing with student grades that were due yesterday.
But your viewers.
But my children. Oh, but my children who are worried about earning credit. Like, so I always put my kids before my Twitch streams, for example. I've had days where, normally I would be streaming and I'm like, you know what? My kids are volunteering at a marathon. I'm going to go support them, or I'm going to go, support this or whatnot. For my kids instead, like I'm going to a football game because I got invited to a football game on Friday night. Sorry guys, no stream. If I do, it's going to be after 10 o'clock. It's going to be really late. So that has happened before.
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely said no stream one Saturday so I could go to a school carnival, and then broke my arm and my foot at the same time and didn't stream for a month.
See?
Yeah.
See?
Yeah, so not a full-time streamer, but
and that actually is one of the questions I had related.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you stream?
I started streaming Pokemon Go almost a little bit less than 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I streamed almost exclusively Pokemon Go for about 2 years. I was told by another streamer, like, you'd actually be really good at this. Because met in person at Pokemon Go Fest, the first one, which is 3 years ago now, which, we're all physically there in the same space, and he ran off to go do something, and I was managing his stream while he was gone, sitting in a bar, and I'm just going through it.
Right.
But yeah, so I got recommended, and then I had several other people tell me yeah, you'd actually be really good at it. And so I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I do pay attention a lot to chat, and I think a lot of that comes from being a teacher, honestly.
Right, yeah.
And working at a Girl Scout camp for 10 years and being a teacher for 6.5, 7 years now. I don't know exactly how long. But teaching for years and working at a Girl Scout camp for years and dealing with kids who want your attention all the time, and how do you manage that and how do you respond? I mean, I really do. I treat chat like they're my students.
Just want to interrupt you there for a second. We're not calling you guys children.
No.
But
we're
sometimes it's hard to tell.
As
what I'm saying. You guys are not children, but it can sometimes be hard to tell.
But some of them are. Some of them are.
Right, so,
I don't see any of my children viewers in your chat right now. But for example, Brady Shady is a high school kid that I know from my local Pokemon community who visits my stream a lot. Jake, not a local, but another high school kid that I've actually met at Pokemon Go Fest before, is a high school kid. I know Ali A is in high school. I have at least 3 or 4 regulars in my stream that are high school kids. Jake from State Farm. There's a long-running joke with him on that one. But I do have actually quite a few kids that are in my stream, and I keep it very PG, family-friendly. not only because of my job, but also because I do know that I have kids in there. Oh, I have a kid more recently, Clayton, who's in there. He always comes into streams and he asks, is this PG? Is this a family-friendly stream?
Right.
And I think I'm about the only one of like very few marblers who are like, yes, you're in a family-friendly space.
Mm-hmm.
And when he's in chat, I'm like, we are not going to a family-friendly streamer, so just be aware. Right. And he'll leave because he didn't want to be around it. But yeah, so I do actually have kids in my chat, but I treat it sort of like I would a classroom. And in my classroom, I have kids that are 19. So, you know, they're adults, but we're going to maintain like there's a 5-year-old in the room.
Yeah.
And you will adhere or you will be gone.
Yeah, that's an interesting parallel you draw there with teaching and streaming. I think that's something that should be explored a little bit. Like teachers would make really good streamers because they're familiar with that kind of a dynamic environment of competitions for attention while still trying to accomplish a larger overarching goal. So that's a unique overlap of skill sets there. So.
Yes.
Well done, madam.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thanks.
Well done.
Thanks. I'm looking at the wrong way. I guess you flipped me again, so yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. We can flip you back.
I'm like, wait.
I actually realized that, but I thought it'd be a little distraction to just do it while in the middle of your talking. So I was like, I'll wait till she says something, and then I'll have a nice smooth transition of bleep.
See, now I can go hi.
Hey.
And not have to worry about which direction I'm looking.
Nothing. I was not doing anything.
But yeah, so yeah, and then there are people who act like preschoolers in an adult human body. But that said, I guess I don't know. As a teacher, I've developed skill sets over the years, and having worked with youth. So here's the embodiment of an internet troll: a small child mindset who is seeking attention, and the easiest way to get that is to find negative attention. And so as a teacher, how would I correct that? Not giving them attention, or only praising positive behaviors. And if it's extremely detrimental, when you can behave, we'll talk. And so I actually have, I don't know if I have one that's a mod right now. Well, my mods tend to be some of my trolls who I have whipped into shape, so to speak. And sometimes that responsibility does wonders for keeping your regulars that are trolls in line. So.
Yeah, I also practice in the art of troll conversion, and I actually have a different approach. I actually make them. I make the stream all about them, so that
you feed them.
Because most trolls, their empowerment comes from their anonymity. And the moment they're recognized as a human being with opinions and a life and origins and a situation, they suddenly feel like they're being exposed as a human being and not just a name on a screen. And they get very uncomfortable very quickly. But
that can work too.
That requires a certain amount of social control. So if you are not a socially dominant person, I would not recommend that as a default go-to strategy. That's just something I can get away with because I am who I am. But it's kind of going to what you were saying is you need to understand where they're at mentally and how you can manipulate that against them for your benefit. Either not feeding into them or giving them what they actually want, even if they don't realize it, right? Because I've had people that come in and they're trying to troll and it's not working and they get frustrated, so they just start spamming TOS terms in chat, so I'm forced to time them out so that I don't get in trouble. But I only give them like a 5-minute timeout. I don't ban them, I don't whatever. It's just like 5-minute timeout, I'm not timing you out because I'm giving up. I'm timing you out because I don't want my channel flagged for a TOS violation. And then they'll come back the next day and they'll be like, hey Shen, how's it going? And like suddenly they're just a human being. And it's like, oh, really? Now you want to talk. And it's because I wasn't giving into them, they realized what they were actually trying to get. And they almost felt better because they're like, wow, he actually was trying to talk to me like a real human being. And that actually kind of felt good. I kind of want more of that. Right? And so there's a lot of ways you can manipulate those, let's call them primitive behaviors. And by primitive, I mean just behaviors that don't have a lot of thought behind them. We're biological organisms. We've got, 1 billion years of animalistic evolution behind us. There's a lot of behaviors that are ingrained into our psyches. And we are one of very few, if not the only species currently that has evolved to a point to be aware to the extent that those biases exist. And as a quick aside, I know I don't even know what question you asked anymore, but we're just going to keep going.
I froze.
Like, tying back into my entomological interest in insect behavior, they've done computer models of ant colony exploration and navigational efficiency. And by that I mean an ant just wanders around the forest floor and finds something. It knows, after wandering aimlessly through the forest floor, how to beeline straight back to the colony and then leave a chemical trail that signals this is where food is on their way back. And then the other ants recognize that chemical scent and follow the beeline back to the food source. And beyond that, sometimes that source, you have to go like up a really steep hill and down a really steep hill. And really, if you just go like around the hill, it's 20 feet shorter of a route, which to an ant is a monumental amount of distance. And so other ants will see the scent, but they'll wander a little bit away from it. And then they'll like go back to it to check in it, and they'll wander in again. And they're leaving their own scent trail. And each ant that's finding its own path to the source and back is leaving a scent trail. And through basic mathematics, the shortest route means an ant's going to go back and forth more times, right? So if one route's 20 feet and the other route is 30 feet, one ant going the same time, the ant on the shorter route is going to go through that 3 times in the same time it takes the other ant to go twice, which means 3 paths will have been gone on that one line and 2 paths have gone on the other, or more specifically, 3 times a scent for food has been left on that shorter path, and 2 times that scent has been left on the longer path, which means the shorter path is 50% stronger in scent. So more ants are going to use that path. And as this evolves over time, the shortest path keeps getting trafficked more, and through that kind of chaotic exploration, the shortest path is found. And slime molds do the same thing. And you wonder what this has anything to do with anything. Well, this is an active mental process for an ant, because they only have about 20,000 brain cells, not counting their ganglia and their nervous structure. Their actual cognitive brain is not very complex. So pretty much every brain cell they have is going into that process. Humans do the same thing, but if you think about it, you never really think about your path. Like if you're walking through a train terminal and you're trying to get from gate A to gate 9, and you have to go across the path, and there's kiosks in the way, there's people in the way, there's benches in the way, and you just find a path, usually the shortest path through that. But you're not actively thinking, I have to go to the kiosk and then turn right, and then I have benches in front of me, so now I have to go to a little bit to the left, and then there's 3 people crossing in front of me, so I got to slow down. You kind of do that while you're talking on the phone. You're focusing on your conversation. You're not focusing on what you're walking in. And the tie-in there is that what ants have to use their 20,000 brain cells to do cognitively, you've evolved in your reptilian brain to do automatically, subconsciously. And so it turns out that the same predictive models for ant traffic maps onto pedestrian traffic, because even though ants are actively thinking about it and humans are subconsciously thinking about it, it's because humans are subconsciously thinking about it that it's a simpler process. They're not using their frontal lobe. They're relying on that reptilian brain, that stupid animal, to path their way through where they're going. So you can actually use an ant model in a train station to model how humans will be navigating. And they do very simple things like, okay, there's going to be a lot of congestion in this one spot. If we put a circular kiosk there, people are going to naturally rotate counterclockwise around it, and that'll redirect the traffic, and boom, the traffic's 20% more efficient in the train station. And it's not because humans are smarter, it's because we're actually using less of our brain to do something. And so it becomes much more predictable. You know, if every person was individually analyzing and trying to calculate their way through a or a train station, it'd be a mess. But because we're all doing it stupidly subconsciously, it's very predictable. And trolling, going back, I know, we're back. We made it, guys. We made it back. I was coming full circle the whole time. I'm glad we all got on this journey. But trolling's the same thing. They're acting on basic animalistic impulses of attention and inclusion, and you can use that to your advantage because they're not really thinking about what they're doing. They're just going for the lowest common denominator of achieving their hierarchy of needs, right? So you can manipulate that against them pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
You're using animal behavior to do it. I'm using educational psychology.
Yeah. There we go. We did it. GG's. The closest I've been to touching a real human being in the last 2 months.
Ooh, instant game insights. Do you find yourself teaching to other demographics or individuals in other aspects of your life? Yes? You mean like teaching adults and things like that? Or like other ethnicities? Yes to both. The school I used to work at, that I worked at for 4 years, actually mostly Hispanic and Black, about 50% each. So can't turn it off. Yeah, I can't turn it off. It just happens. So I have actually, I don't know. You're talking about it with demographics. If you're talking about race, like I have a way of connecting with other ethnicities with different ages.
I think he means inside and outside of the school environment.
Yes, so. And yes to all of that. Yeah. I taught, because I was really big into Pokemon Go for a really long time. I took like a 9-month break, and I just recently started playing it again. I taught a lot of people in our area, in our community, about that game. And we're talking people that are old enough to be my parents or grandparents that I'm teaching about a game.
Terrain, windows here, our bedroom, including the ones behind the bed.
I hear Papa Shins. Anyway, yeah. So yes, I mean, you find yourself in teacher mode often. Yeah, all the time. I can turn it off, but that's usually reserved for small groups and stuff like that. Family situations and things like that mainly are really close friends. But yeah, no, my teacher mode brain is ingrained. Like, my teacher mode brain started out as Girl Scout counselor brain, and it just evolved. I was a tutor during college, so I tutored math and chemistry. So it was developed there further, and then through teaching it developed. Like, it's been there for a really, really long time.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example that kind of corrects a common misconception a lot of people have about teaching, is that the ability to teach does not come from a mastery of a subject. The ability to teach is its own thing. And really, the best teachers can teach a subject they know nothing about, because they'll know how to acquire the appropriate information that needs to be taught. And even if they're unfamiliar, they will go on that exploratory journey with their students in real time. So they'll be asking the same questions the students will be asking and answering them in a way that the students would want them to be answered. So it's really that, it really is true that a good teacher can teach anything, and it has nothing to do with your actual informational capacity. It's its own ability.
Yeah, some of the first things I was teaching was actually backpacking skills.
Yeah.
Well, in Girl
Don't
Scouts,
eat that. You don't know what it is.
I'm still in Girl Scouts. But when I was still a girl in Girl Scouts, one of the things Girl Scouts is really big about is that girls lead. And so my dad was also in Girl Scouts, like more heavily involved in Girl Scouts than I was, ironically.
Oh, as a dad. As a dad.
An adult volunteer for our council.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Like,
for a second there, I was picturing your dad as a young child in Girl Scouts. I was like, wait a minute, I'm missing something.
No, my entire family is lifetime members of Girl Scouts. My sister actually works for Girl Scouts now in Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah, so been heavily involved. Yeah, so one of the things that we did, like my dad was in charge of the backpacking program for a number of years for our Girl Scout council. And I was doing backpacking orientations, which is like, you have maybe never camped in a tent before. We're going to learn how to pitch a tent. Like, we're going to learn how to identify things like poison ivy, because don't touch it. We're going to learn how to build a fire, like a proper campfire. Usually that was more of like a summer camp thing that I taught, but we're going to learn how to cook on a fire, like on a propane fire, because when you're backpacking, a lot of times you can't build a fire because of fire bans and stuff like that. And so teaching those skills as like a teenager, like we're talking 14 years old, and I'm teaching other girls my age, sometimes older, those skills. And so that was like really where I think I first started really teaching on a regular basis, and then worked at a Girl Scout camp for about 10 years where I was teaching other things. Not only that, because I did teach like how to build a fire and stuff like that, but canoeing and archery and riflery and hiking and all sorts of stuff. Science-y things and like kitchen science stuff. But yeah, I mean, I was doing all of that before I was in college. So it's been around for a while.
I guess before we abandon this teaching avenue too much further, I did have one question still related that I would like to get into at this point, being that as we just discussed, there's no real category of teaching so much as it is an ability. So to that effect, do you see your life getting to a point beyond teaching? And I don't mean that as a limitation, I mean that as just where you choose you're not going to teach anymore. And then if so, what would that life be?
So interestingly enough, I actually left the teaching profession for about 2 years. I was a teacher. Like, I graduated, I did my student teaching, I graduated, I went straight into teaching. I taught for the rest of that school year, and then I had like a really negative experience with the administration at that school. In like the regards of like, I caught kids cheating and they were trying to pressure me into not punishing a specific child because she was on the softball team.
Right.
And can we get her to pass, or can we just give her the benefit of the doubt? And it's like, she walked out of my room with my test. Like, no, she made me like stop in the middle of the day and completely redo and like revamp and go make copies of a test in the middle of a school day. Like, no. Anyway, that wasn't the only bad experience, but that was, for example, one of them.
Right.
And it turned me off from teaching for a few years. And so I actually got a job in industry, which is where I was working as a research chemist at a company that developed touchscreens and stuff like that. And I used my chemistry degree, which I enjoyed that job quite a bit. Being there made me miss that teaching aspect. And so when that company started to look at moving to another state and shutting down things like that, I found a job back in teaching, because it was like, I think it was in April or something like that. And so I found a job that I would start the next school year teaching. And so I went back to teaching. So I actually know that I would probably look for something in the chemistry field, where I get to use my degree, because I am a massive nerd and I do enjoy that stuff. And I will go relearn things if I need to, or learn new aspects, because a degree in chemistry is really just the basis. And then you have to apply that to whatever field you're in, because there's so much to chemistry. And it really just depends on what field you're looking at.
Yeah, it really goes to any field, honestly. Especially like computer programming. It's like, you need to learn computer programming, but when you get a job, they're using their own software that you have to relearn from the beginning. And in some cases, depending on the industries, and I'm not just talking chemistry or computer programming, just any industry, some companies actually prefer people that haven't been educated in the field, because it's easier to teach people who don't know anything than people who have an idea but for the wrong system. So it's always kind of interesting how that kind of works out in each individual situation.
Yeah, and it's not always every degree means like you're only learning basic skills. Like my sister, for example, has a degree in forestry. Well, she has worked at camps for, I don't even know how long, probably over 15 years now. I don't know exactly how long, but she uses it in some regards. But if she were getting a job as a forester, she would use a lot more of those skills, and it's not necessarily like having to relearn the entire field that's pertinent for that particular job. But it depends on your job. And with a lot of sciences in general, because computer science you're talking about is actually a science, forestry is actually a science as well, but it's a little bit different. You're having to learn that field with that job. And so I would probably go into something with chemistry, maybe not necessarily like touchscreens again, but that aspect of inorganic chemistry or organic chemistry, because I actually used both, but I would stay away from the biochem because I'm not a fan of biology.
I think there's a long running story, or at least history, with a lot of colleges where like that first biochem course kills a lot of people.
Oh, I knew I didn't like biology way before I took biochem.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't like biology when I was in high school. I wasn't bad at it. I just did not enjoy the memorization and
That's what I'm saying. It's like there's so much you have to learn just to understand the basics of biochemistry, because any organism at this day and age is so hyper evolved that it is there's no simple system anywhere. And every chemical in any living thing is being used for more than one system, and it's balanced in more than one system. So like one system's evolved to use that chemical at a 5% concentration, and the other system has used it at a 5% concentration. And if it's at 6, this system works better, but this system works worse. And if this one's at 4, this one works worse, and this one works better. And like it's and when those systems are acting differently, then the other chemicals they're using are different, and that changes the other systems. Like it's like it gets out of control so fast. So I would say like I know at my college, like biochem was the class that killed more majors than anything else. It's like, I want to be a biologist. Okay, take biochem 101. I want to be an architect.
Yeah, I think at my college, honestly, if I were to weed them out, I would say organic chemistry was a big one.
Yeah.
And then just general chemistry actually killed a lot of people who wanted to go in as chemistry majors.
That's surprising.
Which I found interesting, because for me, basic or gen chem was a repeat of my high school chemistry class.
Right, yeah.
With a few extra topics in there. And I'm like, what did you learn in high school? Like I would sit in chemistry and do the Sudoku in the newspaper and crosswords and not really be paying a whole lot of attention and still get A's on the tests and stuff like that. And I know I'm a massive nerd and I grew up around scientific minded people. But you learned this in high school. Yeah. How do you not?
I had a similar experience in high school. Is like I watched a lot of PBS as a kid. So I had like Bill Nye and Wishbone and all those other educational things. And like the majority of the high school sciences I had already learned. So like I didn't even need to pay attention in class. So I would just doodle or whatever I was doing, making up my own math problems or developing geometric theories for impossible figures, whatever I felt like working on at the time. And I would just didn't have any trouble with the course. It was like, I already learned this stuff. Like, I didn't get it. Like, why are people, how do people not already know this? Like, come on, it's a wetland, guys. It's a filtration system between a watershed and the ocean. Like, that's how these things work. Like, come on.
I think I was sort of like that with math, yeah, in high school. Oh my gosh. Even in college, I didn't have to start actually paying a whole lot of attention to math until I was in calculus.
Well, at this point, we're getting close to that 2-hour mark. Are there any pressing questions you've yet to get to? And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to get through that because it is raining, so I do have to close some windows. So
Oh my.
take some contemplative silence to sort out your most pressing question, and we'll get to it as soon as I return.
Okay. I got one, guys. Are y'all ready for it? Quick while he's not here. Chair stream evolved. Right? Now look at this chair right here. Ready. Shoney's ready.
I have
You
returned.
must have a lot of... Oh, that was a lot of windows, wasn't it?
It was.
All right. So earlier we were talking about you wanted to go into the insect behavior field.
Yeah.
How has your vision of your personal future changed over the years?
I don't think my view of my personal future has changed.
Or evolved, maybe is a better word.
There's a lot of things I would like to get to and know that I have to get to. And I guess the details of those things fill in more over time. But the general sense of purpose kind of has remained consistent for a long time. Pretty much since, I'd say, 11th or 12th grade in high school. So when I was like 16 or 17. Each experience I get definitely informs a better way of going about achieving those goals and destinations, or the importance or non-importance of certain things. But I think I'm a fairly unique situation. I don't expect a lot of people to have the outlook on life that I have. And that's just because I have come to know certain things about myself and about society as a whole, at least in the way that I view it, that for me there's not a lot of wiggle room and there's not a lot of question. There's just, these are the things that need to be done, and failure is not an option. So I wouldn't say, and especially college, if anything, just reinforced it. I kind of didn't want to go to college in the first place. But everyone else in my family has gone to college, and it's like I didn't really have anything else going on after high school anyway, so might as well go to college. But as soon as I was firm enough to kind of stand up to my family and say I'm not going to do this, I didn't do it, and have continued to live my life ever since. So yeah.
So you're still doing stuff with entomology type stuff, or the insect behaviors?
As a personal interest, for sure. I think especially in this day and age, it becomes more and more important because insects have speciated more than any other order of macroscopic organisms, and they are in every single ecosystem generally as the predominant factor. Like, they're not the predominant producer most oftentimes, because plants are the predominant producer, but they're more key species are insects than anything else for ecologies, because in a lot of environments there's usually a host plant. Like if it's a birch forest, or if it's an elephant grass field in India, or if it's a bamboo forest in China, right? There's a key plant. And yes, there's other biodiversities in the plant kingdom in those areas, but there's generally one producer for those kinds of environments. But the insects that host on those plants are astronomically diverse. And because of that diversity, it's very easy to see differences in similar areas with those insect populations. So going back to like the birch forests, right? If you see more of one caterpillar than another, why? And once you understand that, then you get an idea about what that means for the forest. So I see more of the woolly bears than I do of the sphinx moths. Well, why is that? Well, it's because in this other area there's more birds, and birds predate the sphinx moths more than they do the woolly bears. Okay, well, why are there more birds in that area? Then we can start investigating that, right? And so these key species that tell you things about the health of certain environments or the differences in certain environments are more often insects than anything else. And with the climate changing and with human expansion increasing, you have fewer environments that are in more turmoil. And I don't mean turmoil as in everything's going to shit. I just mean turmoil and things are changing. And if things are changing, you need to know what direction they're headed. And if it's a good or bad direction and what you can and can't do about it. And insects are a huge indicator to those kinds of answers. So if anything, I think it's more important. And while I may not be leading those fields because there are people better at it than I think maintaining an interest in that will serve me better in the future should I come to a position of social influence of some kind. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting.
That was a good question. I liked it.
Yeah. You're welcome.
All right. I'm gonna lead out with this question in hopefully such a way that we can kind of get to a natural conclusion for this wonderful time we've had together. And I do appreciate, again, for you coming in and spending some hours here chatting away. How do you approach the construction of a map?
How do I approach the construction of a map? So lately I've been doing Wonders of the World for SPOO. And one of the first things I do is I look at pictures of whatever I'm trying to construct. So right now, for example, I'm working on the Grand Canyon. I've been to the Grand Canyon, but I'm still going to go look up pictures, maybe ones that I've taken, that other people have taken, of different areas, different angles and stuff like that. With some of the older wonders that don't exist anymore, you go look at what would it look like and see what scholars say or what, different artists have rendered. And you sort of take that and then sort of come up with an idea of, well, what can I use for this part? What can I use for this part? And I sort of start with the overall structure, and I don't worry about the start or the end. That will come later once I get an idea of the actual structure. And then I try to figure out how I'm going to weave the track through that. So, how my simplified version of my approach, and it's sort of different for each map.
Right.
I find if I just slap track pieces together, I don't really know what I want to do with it, and
Right.
I sort of get
for
lost.
For you, it's more you need a kernel of inspiration to grow the track out of.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I like that. It builds into your life of teaching and fostering the growth of other individuals. You got to foster the maps in the same way.
Right. Yeah, my creativity is not create things out of nothing. It's more of take an idea and apply what I have learned to it. So I'm not like what you would think of when you think of artists or anything like that. I'm not creating out of nothing or inspired by, just my thoughts. Like, I have to have something concrete that I'm going to start with. And so for me, that right now, I'm looking at the Grand Canyon. So I'm looking at the Grand Canyon going, okay, well, I need to remember that this isn't going to look exactly the same. And so that is really hard for me to do, because I want it to look like the same thing. And that's really hard for me to pull away from and go, no, I need to change it up a little bit. I need to make it work a little bit better. So what can I do that might help with that? And so I really do need to look at something and go, this is what I'm modeling. This is what I want my product to be. Like, I want something that looks like this, or an idea that it relates to this, that someone can look at it and go, oh, that's the Taj Mahal. Oh, look at that. That's a palace. Okay, the name makes sense now. Or, stuff like that. I think the pyramids, I think so far this season, look, the pyramids this season is probably the best one I've built. Ironically, it was the first one that I built. Because that one, you look at it.
I like them.
Yeah, you look at it and you go, those are the pyramids of Giza. That is, the Great Pyramid, and you can see the bald top of it, and it looks like the pyramid. And so with that map, for example, I built the pyramids first, and then I wove the track through it. And then I was like, I have leftover track pieces. Well, on the Great Pyramid, I don't have the top of it. I don't have the bald top. I could make that. What would look good? Oh, the bounce pads. And so that was like the last thing I did, was that touch on it. So I started out with like the basic shapes, wove the path through it, and then did like the artistic touches at the end. But I needed to see the pyramids and look at pictures of them to, even though like we all know what they look like, I want to look at pictures and try to get the details in there and stuff like that.
And Instant, how dare you accuse me of having a plan? To even suggest I even have a remote idea of what I'm doing when I'm making a map. How dare you, sir? How dare you? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to conclude the official portion of Losing Our Marbles, a talk between two, with our wonderful guest, GoTeach. Thank you again for being here.
You're welcome.
For episode number 2. It's been delightful. We will be continuing the stream with more viewer-based questionnaires and answers. So if you want to get in on that, make sure you're here every Saturday to join in on the fun live. And thank you for watching. GoTeach, anything you'd like to promote before
I stream on Twitch.
Yeah! Twitch.tv/GoTeach. Link down below. Click it and follow. It's very simple.
Oh, did you want my Discord link as well?
Sure. Pop that in chat.
Okay.
For all to see.
Yeah,
That's where you can get all the details and all the information. And again, thank you all for watching. Hope you've had some fun. And we'll see you for the next episode.